For joining us this afternoon for today's topic, personalisation in action, turning trends into deeper customer connections. Today's topic is one that I've been really keen to present for a while. It's something we've been, I think, actively doing, talking about since we set up Ratio back in 2015. Our very first customers were built around personalisation, people investing in technology, looking to turn on what was then basic personalization scenarios, and a lot has happened in between years that we're going to talk about in terms of like big massive changes in terms of data acquisition, the use of AI, and just sort of the proliferation, scope, and improvement of technologies. But before we get onto that, just super brief overview of who Ratio Partners is for people on the call who are not familiar with us or haven't worked with us before. We are an optimization experience consultancy. We work with a wide range of brands from different sectors around how they can leverage your analytics and customer data to deliver super personalized, highly targeted, and highly converting digital experiences. Some of the things we're going to cover today, we're going to do a brief overview into personalization, look at the background, why it's still a thing, why it's still relevant, and if anything, why it's more relevant than it was in previous years. We're going to look at some of the ways of identifying personalization and business opportunities. So identifying where personalization can drive a positive impact for your business and for your customers' engagement with your digital channels. And we're going to look at some of the steps involved in crafting a personalization strategy. So my name is Mario Kiriakou. I am one of the founders here at Ratio, and I'll be leading us through today's presentation. Before we kick off, just a couple of things. Today's session will be recorded, and we'll be sharing a copy of the recording in a couple of days. We'll also have some time for Q&A at the end. If anyone on the phone today joining us from around the world has any questions, feel free to drop these into the Zoom Q&A bar, and I'll get round to these at the end of today's session. So why are we still talking about personalization? When we started Ratio back in 2015, it was very much working with clients who had invested in some specific marketing technologies, and some of the features included the ability to personalize the digital experience, and they bought into this idea of having, optimized, personalized end-to-end experiences. And the reality was, at the time, I think the vision and the technology gap, the technology hadn't caught up with the vision, really. We're still talking about it for many of the same reasons why personalization has been top of mind in many digital reports for the last number of years. Delivering a relevant, tailored experience that's not creepy, most importantly, that is built on an understanding of who your consumers are, how they engage, and what they're interested in, ultimately has benefits not just for the consumer, but also for the business, ultimately, depending on what you're doing, which is whether you're selling product, trying to generate leads. If we can be as relevant as humanly possible across all your different channels, there's a benefit for the business and for the individual. But this isn't new. I've taken this slide from a presentation we gave back in 2018, where we talked about the benefits of personalization, the fact that it was valuable. So many of the things I'm talking about today about why you should consider personalization, why you should build it into your plans for 2025, are things which the market have been talking about for years. But why has there been a gap between talking about its value, having it top of mind for marketers' plans each and every year, but a big gap in terms of organizations, I think, doing personalization well? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today, because a lot of things have changed over the last 2 to 4 years. In terms of data, personalization comes into its own and truly shines when you can scale personalization beyond an individual's abilities to create, individual personalization scenarios. And we'll talk about the move from manual to automation in a second. But personalization really comes into its own around richer data sets. And over the last couple of years, especially with the growth of customer data platforms, which connect with your multiple platforms, your multiple marketing systems, the upshot is the ability to collect far more data across far more channels. And that is allowing, I think, personalization to finally become a scalable option outside of traditional A/B testing and traditional optimization methods. Because of the growth of an improvement around data collection platforms, whether you want to call them CDPs or whether you use systems like Telium to plumb the data into a central point, the reality is we have far more options around capturing data points around how your customers and consumers are interacting with your website and also the wider channels, whether that's email or apps, for example. Each of those steps can be tracked, but because we're capturing those within different platforms outside of traditional analytics tools like Google Analytics, for example, that's given us the benefits and possibilities to deploy personalization at scale. When we started the consultancy back in 2015, one of the areas that we struggled with is in terms of getting clients to become more mature personalization efforts. It was they had the tools, they had the ability to create a personalized scenario, but the data was in platforms which weren't connected to the personalization tools they were using. And that's becoming less of a thing at the moment, because the sophistication of those data collection panels, platforms, the ability to ingest data from how people engage with an app or your website, or even your payment providers, those are providing the rich data sets for the insights teams to analyze. Another reason that we're seeing a bigger growth in the thinking, deployment, and planning around personalization is the increased practical applications around AI. One of the things, those rebuttals that we used to get pre-pandemic, especially around the use of personalization, was, if you were looking to do traditional CRO optimization methods for A/B testing, it was scalable, but with personalization, one of the pushbacks was always, we're time poor as a marketing team. If we were to deploy, 5 to 10 personalization scenarios as an example, we would need to create, X amount of more content, and we're struggling to do that. So if we took personalization to its 9th degree, we would lack the ability to create the content, manage deployment, and measure the impact. And we're seeing increasing number of conversations with businesses around the applying applicable uses of AI. And one of the applicable uses is around supporting personalization, especially around its integration with tools like customer data platforms, integration to things like data lakes, etc. When you combine capturing richer data set on your customers combined with AI tools, we have the ability to begin to scale a lot more personalization scenarios. Because we move from traditional area, so depending on, I can see we've got quite a wide range of organizations on today's call. When I had a look at the registrations, I can see there was people from professional services companies, retailers, travel companies, and each of these companies, you'll most likely have a wide range of marketing technologies. What we have seen traditionally with companies who have personalization tools, you could take a couple of examples. Sitecore has had personalization tools, Optimizely, Adobe, Test and Target has personalization scenarios. It's been very much rules-based. If a individual interacts with a piece of content, serve them Y content. And that is limited marketing team's ability to scale because it's very manual. You have to create those rules manually. You can, beyond creating a few, it's difficult to have a sufficient impact on the conversions of your website by using personalization. But AI supported, we're seeing with the type of organizations we're working with across a range of sectors, the ability to automate and scale. So some of the easier ones are around moving away from rules-based personalization scenarios to automating the creation of those, richer analysis and testing to measure the impacts of those scenarios as well. A third area that we're seeing as a big driver towards personalization beyond improvements of data collection, improvements in technology, is around the deprecation of third-party cookies. This is something which has been on the cards for a while, but is also something which is being constantly delayed. But organizations have been and are planning around what happens when third-party cookies are deprecated, and there's been a greater emphasis on looking at the data that you own, you control, and that you can leverage. So looking at zero first-party data, so zero data that customers have explicitly shared, first-party data, what you've been able to track across your own digital channels, and looking at how we can leverage that to deliver a better experience, but also to support business goals around how do we make the experience more relevant, but drive ultimately more conversion. So this push to leverage the data that we own is a big driver around adopting and planning around personalization in 2025. So what's the opportunity and what's holding marketers back? Because there is an opportunity, but there's also very real reasons that will prevent organizations from deploying it. We traditionally see with lots of the organizations we work with, especially now where consumer demand for products and services is slightly softening, that acquisition budgets are holding firm because no one wants to stop spending money on customer acquisition. Because in one sense, it's relatively easy to turn paid budgets on. But there's some very real reasons around the planning around implementing personalization and general optimization. So some of the things we see holding marketers back from getting into those serious personalized experiences, data could be held across multiple systems, which kind of speaks to that opportunity and growth around better data collection. But having your data in different systems means you struggle to have a single view around the customers and therefore identify what type of experiences we could deliver. And therefore feeds into sort of that lack of data links between data types. One thing that we see is around, especially for marketing teams, a challenge around extracting actionable insights from your analytics or customer data. Using your data to try and identify and ideate what those personalized experiences could look like by identifying actual bottlenecks through the data. And we find clients find that quite a difficult thing. And that kind of feeds into, identifying actionable insights is a challenge. Clients and organizations who get into the nitty-gritty of personalization, there's a couple of challenges we see coming out of marketing teams who perhaps have the technology in place to deliver personalized experiences, but then find either it's not generating the impact they were hoping, or a bit like when you have so many options in front of you. You imagine going to a restaurant with a 20-page menu of food items. Sometimes it's going to be hard to figure out exactly what you should focus on. We see that with personalization as well. When there's so many things you could be personalizing against, where should you start? So some of the challenges we see, like time and time again, measurement without purpose. Deploying a personalization experience is great. It feels cool, but what's the point if it isn't tied to a specific customer challenge and it isn't tied to a specific measurable endpoint that we can then say, okay, we've tested this, we've deployed it, we have an understanding of the impact, whether positive or negative, that it's had on the customer. Identifying an audience. So I mentioned, the ideation on coming up with personalization ideas can be a challenge because there's so many things you could do. But identifying which audiences is a challenge we see from many marketing organizations. What segments should you focus on? What individuals? How do you get as granular as you can, or potentially can, with personalization? We'll talk about later on, segmentation versus one-to-one personalization as well. Also, time poor. Marketing teams are invariably busy as it is, and layering on new initiatives require additional time, bandwidth, and skills that teams not necessarily have in-house or need the time to upskill for. Where does this fit into your marketing mix? Well, in terms of the types of benefits, type of businesses that can leverage personalization is a wide range. So traditionally, I think the perception has been personalization for e-commerce retailers. Retailers have been doing personalization for years. They perhaps call it, product recommendations. So we're all used to engaging with brands like ASOS, etc., who have rich product recommendations. That's an element of personalization. But outside of, I suppose, that traditional use case for personalization, we see it deployed across other sectors like insurance, B2B. With B2B, it feeds into things like account-based marketing. With insurance, it feeds into and travel off the back of things like supporting the improvement of paid for acquisition campaigns. So if you're spending a large amount of money on, say, Facebook advertising for your travel company, personalizing the impact of those adverts based on the data points is a use case that we see sort of used over and over again to help generate more bang for your spending buck. It supports your various KPIs, whether you're a retailer or a travel company or someone who sells a transactional product where you can just put a credit card in and buy. It can support increasing basket size, driving more conversions. If you're a B2B company, feeds into how do we increase lead acquisition. And we see it feeding into solving problems around organizations. And if you look at single channels like websites, where perhaps you have lots and lots of content or lots and lots of products, helping your customers navigate around your, say, single channel website, for example, and get to the product or service that they want as quickly as possible by recognizing something that we know about them. These are solving specific problems that we see generating incremental revenue gains for companies. In terms of how you could begin to approach this, we see a couple of key steps. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to personalization. We had a client we worked with a while back, and they had an investment in lots of different technologies, and they always said they had all the gear but no idea. And I think very much it's around assessing your specific personalization maturity, because you could have the technology, but knowing what the idea is, where you should start, can be a challenge. When you speak to technology vendors, invariably, they will sell you on the vision and dream of personalized end-to-end, one-to-one experiences. And we're going to talk about that later on. But the reality is, if you're starting out in your personalization journey, we need to be realistic about where you currently are as a moment in terms of your organization, your resources, and make a realistic assessment of where is a good place to start. Your end goal may be to personalize for every single customer segment, but that's a long process. We want to look at what does small look like? How do we show that personalization drives incremental gains and is a value add in our marketing mix? And as part of that, we look at things like, assess your maturity. So looking at something like the personalization maturity pyramid from Optimizely is a good example. Look at things like what resources do you have internally? What technology do you have in place? What type of data do you currently collect on customers? Where is that held? Is it realistic to look at hyper personalization as a phase one campaign, or should we look at getting the foundations in place, starting small, and then growing from there over the next 6 to 9 months, for example? Step 2. understanding your customer data. Each of everyone on today's call, when I was having a look at your company websites to try and get a feel for the type of businesses you're coming from, I could see the type of sectors, but invariably I'm not going to know anything around the type of campaigns you're running, the type of data you're collecting. And one of the things I always recommend is, if you're considering personalization as a digital initiative in the new year, look at the type of data that you're currently collecting on your customers from, zero, first party, all the way through to third party. Look at the data. What data points do you capture, and divide that further if you can. Can you divide it into demographic data? Can you divide it into geographic data? We've got like a big massive Excel sheet offline where it kind of breaks down sort of the typical data segments and data points that you could potentially capture, but build up a picture on the type of data that you have, because that will allow us to interrogate the data, look at insights, and try and identify the blockers, opportunities that exist, and also begin to come up with ideas around who should we focus on and what should we personalize initially. And then feeds into your defining the opportunities. There are various ways. We do a lot of insight and analytics analysis. There's a lot of looking at, if you look at, say, a single channel, your website, for example, looking at how customers interacting. But one of the simple ways, if you have in-house skills, is look at things like funnel analysis to prioritize efforts. So if you're a travel company, for example, and you have, say, 3 to 4 steps that a customer will take in terms of researching a holiday, shortlisting a trip, adding something to basket, adding the extras, putting in payment terms, checking out. Let's analyze that funnel. If you're a B2B company, it's like analyzing the marketing and sales funnel. Analyze that, look at how individuals are moving across the different stages of the funnel, look at where people are dropping out. And we can use that as a way of zero in on opportunities to deploy personalization to support specific business challenges around we're seeing people drop out, for example, of a basket journey, of a checkout journey. How can we improve those numbers? Because it gives us something measurable. It gives us something hard to focus on, because it's linked to revenue. And so therefore, it's something where we could easily prove the value of deploying personalization as an optimization technique. The ideation and building a backlog stage. Whether you're a small marketing team or part of a large company, it kind of, the end result's kind of the same. Everyone is time poor, everyone's busy, everyone's working on their own things. If you're going to sit down as a marketing team, use a framework. So there are loads out there. The one on the screen is Ratio's own framework that we use with customers who are looking to deploy optimization and personalization, the Anchor framework. But it gives you a way of, whether you're using Excel or Miro or just simple old-fashioned post-it notes on the wall, of breaking down the problems to be solved and identifying the segments and solutions. So, use a framework. I mean, obviously, I love it people use ours, but equally, using a framework that takes you from start to finish is the key thing in terms of helping marketing teams get away from that challenge of, we don't know where to focus our efforts on. And also, one of the things just to say about ideation is, when you have so many options, look at the biggest opportunities. So if the majority of your marketing spend goes on paid acquisition channels, perhaps that's the biggest area to focus on, because if we can improve the conversion rate from, Google or Facebook advertising, we have a clear use case and business benefits that we can then share with the business. So, identify your biggest problem or focus area at the moment and see how personalization could support that area as well. I've kept technology in as a quite a late step. And I've done this deliberately. I mean, my background before starting Ratio was technology side. So I used to work running marketing campaigns for technology vendors. And when you're technology vendor side, the pitch is very simple, especially around personalization. It is if you buy the technology, that is the problem. That is the this is how your problem will be solved by just buying the right piece of kit and getting it set up. And actually, we don't see that as being true. I mean, yes, you will need technology to deploy any type of optimization technique, so it can't be discounted. But we definitely don't believe it should be the very first thing you do. We think, and in our experience, it's around the strategy and the planning and the ideation, what we want to do, and defining if there is a business opportunity for personalization. And when you have defined that, then it's about looking at your data, your technology, what systems you have in place. So before companies go out and go shopping for new technology, one of the things we always say is audit your existing MarTech stack, look at the systems that you have, what are their capabilities, speak to the vendors, get an update on the features. Invariably, we see organizations have tools that were bought by previous teams where they've moved on, and there's perhaps sometimes a lack of understanding about what you already have. Identify what you have, what it can do, and if there is a gap, then at that point, look at the wider market and identify a supporting technology that could feed into your marketing plans for the year ahead. We learnt this the hard way when we started Ratio, and we very much, even though we never called ourselves a personalization agency at the time, all of our projects were built around personalization. And one of the things, I think, as soon as we started setting up personalization rules for clients on their websites, one of the questions that was always answered was, so what? Yes, you've personalized the homepage for, a segment or off of the back of a marketing campaign, but who cares? This is where treating a personalization campaign in the same way you would treat a A/B test, for example, traditional CRO, conversion rate optimization. This is where it comes into its own. A/B test personalization scenarios, because it's true, if you just deploy a personalized experience and don't have anything to measure it against, or are not measuring against an alternative, then how do we know if that's driving a like-for-like improvement? So have a measurable goal, whether it's signing up for a form or adding something to a basket. Have a hard measurable KPI and look to test the impact of personalization so you can prove it adds value. And so getting started with personalization, there's basic segmentation all the way through to one-to-one personalization. Depending on the maturity of your business, even if you're a large, well-supported marketing team, we still invariably see people starting off one to some or one to few, looking at basic segmentation or micro segmentation. When you get to one-to-one personalization, that's when it's fully automated, you're scaling, and we don't see people starting off there. We see people trying to identify basic customer segments that they can apply personalized experiences to, and then building from there. But we want to have, if we was to take a step back and look at the overall potential for personalization, I mean, during today's presentation, I've kind of focused in on sort of the nitty-gritty. But I think it's even if your organization is not at this point, I think it's important to take a step back and just look at the overall potential, especially when you're trying to build a business case internally. The value of personalization, especially now with the growth of better customer data collection, customer data platforms, practical uses of AI, etc., is around supporting the end-to-end experience. We always say customers don't engage with a channel, they engage with a brand. They're not engaging with someone who owns a marketing team who own the app, or engaging with the marketing team who manage the email communication. They're engaging with a brand. And personalization has the potential to support a consistent experience across those channels, which is why we always say it's around understanding and connecting the data between these disparate systems, because website data and email data are separated. The data for your mobile apps is separated. Connecting them together and identifying what the cross-channel opportunity is, I suppose, the big picture benefit of personalization. If you can get it right, it's making sure you're consistent across channels. So if you're saying something at one point, it is your, I suppose, backing up that consistency across your other channels. And in practical terms, the example on screen is a simple multi-channel mock-up for how personalization can be applied. In this instance, it's for an insurance company where a individual, a fictional character called Roz, is searching for insurance quotes on a third-party comparison site, filling in a quote, and then moving through a conversion funnel from a third party through to that insurance company's own website. And the potential for personalization across that journey is around capturing the data points between each of these individual stages and feed it into a system that will allow you as a marketing team to identify the experience opportunity that you could deliver to that individual, whether it's like consistency on colors, branding, tone of voice, copy, right down to making sure your offers are timed correctly based on the data points that we're capturing, but all with an end goal of how do we close this opportunity with this customer and get them to sign up for our product. And this is the I suppose, end ambitious, big picture goal of where we can take personalization. So that brings us to the end. If I was to leave you with the main takeaways, from today's session, it is around, don't get too hung up on the technology side. It's all the biggest and hardest bit is around the planning. What we should do, why we should do it, who we should target. The data, understanding what data you're capturing on customers, how is it collected, where is it stored, how can you use it, being honest with your level of maturity, and not trying to be overly ambitious for a phase one project, trying to prove the value, get going, but also if you had to pick something, pick your most valuable channels to focus on, the channels which generate perhaps the most revenue for the business. Because there'll be a clear use case and benefits for focusing on that. So thank you. That takes us into the session. We do have some time for questions, so feel free to drop these in to the panel. I'll have a quick look to see if we've got chatty people today. See if anyone is shy. Let's have a look. Okay. Well, we don't have questions today. Everyone will have my email. So if you have any questions around, how can you get started with personalization? What is the specific practical use cases for your businesses? Just let me know. Just send me an email. Happy to have a chat. Always love talking about personalization and where it fits into the marketing mix. But that just leaves me to say thank you. I really appreciate when people join us for these sessions. I know people are time poor, so thank you. And I hope to see you again on our next session. So thank you, and hopefully speak to you all soon.